All right, good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with the 207th episode of our Book of Hours run, first one through YouTube, playing as the artist. I had to step away between the last couple of episodes, but I think I roughly know where we left things off. I want to restore my whist at the Sweet Bones, and then we're continuing. Sorry, we did finish reading Origins of Hours. We were actually on to Deaths and Their Evasions. And then from there, we will consider reading some more entries in the house, but only after we see where the seasons take us. I am also getting a little bit of interference in terms of OBS now. It's kind of an all or nothing proposition, so I can reset it and have to reset the stream or the recording. I'm going to just say that this is the tool that I'm using being a little twitchy, and that it should be fine, but I apologize in advance if there's any problems. So far as I can tell, it's just in terms of what it's displaying to me. It isn't the recording's about to blow up kind of a problem. All right, at long last, I am cleaning. Sweet Bones is taking care of my laundry. And as promised, let's read Deaths and Their Evasions. Whoops. I forgot to add the Fusine. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. The last thing for me to do for today will be to take the old moment, and we'll just make sure that we rest on that when the sun goes down. But other than that, I think we're at the end of the season. We'll see what the weather brings, and if it isn't Enuma, we'll at least take a look and see who is arriving on the Affair of the Second Skin. Currently, we have talked with Azita. I'm trying to think... if we're taking edge followers, so I imagine Fraser Strathcoyne would be someone who would visit during this, but I believe there should be at least one other Hyksos visitor who would be attracted to this. No guarantees, of course, but... and then if we do wind up in Enuma, then we have two visitors, in which case, the chances of Hyksos are a little bit higher. Of course, if we wind up in Numa, then we also have, a whole other set of problems in terms of managing my time, but generally a nice set of problems. Let's rest on the old moment. Now that night has fallen, I can rest and perhaps dream on the day's doings. Dreaming on a memory will preserve it past dawn, allowing you to keep it until the following day. Okay, Deaths and Their Evasions. Father Stanislav John Schaller writes of the means and limitation of passage between the orders of the Mansus. No long names hours. Unusually, Father John has written this book in Fusine for, he says, a special secrecy. He speaks very cautiously of the exceptions that can sometimes be made to the edicts of Chancel and Calyptra, and hints at the means by which he successfully returned a lantern long to flesh. Schaller mentions most cautiously of all that he has been permitted to see a book that speaks more deeply on the matter, but that it was surrendered into the shadow of a covenant stone of the Watchman's Tree. It can be retrieved if the 99th wink is reserved under the edict's liminal. This was a big one for me because this is actually what revealed to me another secret of the house, so I did not previously know how to use the inscribed stone. I'd gotten hints before from some of the other books, but I'd always just tried to rest with Edict's Liminal, and I was always missing that one part that didn't quite bring it all together. So this is one of the major reasons why I'm continuing to read all of these different books, because you never quite know what the tipping point is going to be for a couple of these things. And in particular, I'm interested in the Carapace Cross and St. Tentretto, if I can get it, but you don't always get to pick what books you get. Okay, so it seems like we do not have a Numa. Current affairs, what is happening in the world beyond Brandkrug? What visitors will the season bring? And the yearly stipend from St. Ronwin's has arrived, along with the rather usual sniffy reminder that I should spend it wisely. So here, I'm just gonna sit on the... Oops, probably don't want to do that. I'm just gonna sit on the arrangement that I have right now. And it's a sunny day, so we for sure know... I've had a couple of times where I get tripped up. Actually, sorry, I'm trying to remember. I don't think I've had a Numa in this game recently, but I did do a Numa somewhat recently, and there was something about the timing that really tripped me up. Anyways, we won't worry about it right now. We will see who we get to talk with, though. I can offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There's no school in Brandkrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. So this should actually be something we can get done in a day. So we should probably finish our collection of books in one or two loads. Let's do sea stories this time. Ooh, some classics. Matthias and Amethyst Dimigo is an old one. Alright, so this should take us to Salt, I believe. I don't expect too much about the Salt, to be honest, but... You know what? I'm thinking about this goggle-eyed monster. I think I might read Nin's Cages again. Because I was just sort of thinking, like, I'm not really sure Nin's Cages is showing me anything other than the inscribed stone. But it does sort of talk about a sea monster down below, and then that would sort of imply a relationship with the caves. So maybe I want to have a think about that. Alright, I think we have one more after this. Yep. Well, two more, actually. So, almost enough for the full run. We've already used Fusine. Oh, we haven't. Sorry, that's right, because we already used that. Never mind. Alright, and the Larkabine Codex will save for the victory lap, I guess. So, not too much for us to worry about right now. We're just going to we'll let time pass. I might as well talk about the affair of the second skin. Immortals change more slowly than most of us, but even immortals change sometimes. In the city of Marrakesh, the Labite Abykassis has begun a dramatic and dangerous metamorphosis, one that's alarming friends and enemies alike. Azita, the edgelong Azita's eternal enemy twin, Mirad, planned to give Abykassis death with honor. With regret, Azita set out to prevent this. Lalacamia does not have Hyksos. Ah! Alright. Huntress Gourmet, occasional bureau consultant. When it can't be killed and it really needs killing, Cammy is the only one they turn to. Or sorry, Cammy is the one they turn to, not the only one. But no use complaining about it, right? So we can always try to give the spin tree it. Doesn't... That's interesting, actually, that it doesn't indicate that I'm not able to do anything with that. But there are things I need to know. If there's an incident card active, you can discuss it or just leave the slot empty and offer a consultation. Yes, I am here about this trouble in Marrakesh. No one is paying me, not this time. I knew Abykassis once. I will help him if I can. I will put him out of his misery if I must. I hope Abykassis can still be reasoned with. If not, I must be ready. Try a book with as much mystery edge as their edge interest. Okay, so let's find the relevant edge book. We should have a number here. I'm ideally looking for a 4. I will settle for a 6 if I must. Wound wounds is definitely a big one. There we go. Deoris book 3. Ah! Should be paying attention. Okay, so Aramaic, crack track, and Greek. Okay, so we may actually wind up having to give up a couple of the more powerful edge books just because I don't have the right languages for them. Which is, again, no hardship. I'm trying to keep it, give myself some room, but on the second skin. Wish me luck, librarian, but not too much. This hunt, this time, perhaps I would prefer to fail. All right, let's get the reading done. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. We'll restore this right away. So it is spring, and the landlady has served me a slice of her stargazy pie, with the pilchard heads poking cheekily through the hot crust. Now, I want to keep in mind that it's the Larkabine Codex that I want, just because I'm going to have a pile of books coming in. So I'll read all of that, but then we'll move on to the Larkabine Codex. The Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the mansus through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, 7 the doors of the house, 7 for the lesser aspects of the hours, and knock, the aspect above all, for the mother of ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life, in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants no longer permits use of this rite. On Matthias and the amethyst imago, loss, an account of an occult romance. A certain Para, son of Aaron, claims to have written this in a single night as part of his initiation into the Damascene branch of the House of Leith, that order of immortals who rejected their past and future. The laws of the house forbade Matthias to love. The customs of the wood forbade the imago to remain. So he conjured her a final time, when she had uncovered the shears of Alcapura, and she suffered him to cut the wings from her back, so that she might remain, and he suffered her to cut the parts which hold man's seed, to keep them from the detestable act. This was love in all its blood and joy. We have cast Matthias from the house. In the cradle of the roots, Matthias and the imago left their names, and though their names were lost, they found their name-day riddles. This we recall in solution and separation, so that in the presence of the moth our memories may become our futures. Do this wisely in memory of the name and the long who gave up their past, that they might be forgotten together, or together forgotten. The account of Kanishk at the spider's door. Loch Cowley, Kanishk's victim and lover, wrote this account, perhaps posthumously. Kanishk sought to become a name. In pursuit of that end, he made Loch Cowley the vessel of his appetites, promising Loch that they would ascend together. At the spider's door, he betrayed his lover. The Chiliarch listened to it happen and then forced Kanishk into his service. The Chiliarch cannot be denied. Loch Cowley remained to write this work and to describe the outer magics of struggle and contest. If you can just give me a quick second here, I want to write down a quick note to myself. I don't normally like doing this mid-video, but I know this is going to be something that I lose otherwise. There's just some text here that I wanted to record before I lose the book. Okay. Sorry about that. The account of Kanishk at the Spider's Door, Loch Cowley, Kanishk's victim and lover, wrote this account perhaps posthumously. Kanishk sought to become a name. In pursuit of that end, he made Loch Cowley the vessel of his appetites, promising Loch that they would ascend together. At the Spider's Door, he betrayed his lover. The Chiliarch listened to it happen and then forced Kanishk into his service. The Chiliarch cannot be denied. Loch Cowley remained to write this work and to describe the outer magics of struggle and contest. The sea does not regret. Eason Fecri, one-time Secretary Salvant of the Curia of the Isle, responsible for the Curia's healing efforts, writes of his experiences in Brankrug and hints at his travels elsewhere. The sea does not regret the tide, Fecri writes, for when the tide has passed, it leaves its traces on the sand, which traces are the sea's memory. Fecri is a keen fisherman and speaks glowingly of the fish suppers of Brankrug. He also admits that his enthusiasm for the bounty of the sea has altered him, that before he came to Brankrug he consumed only those things found in the earth. I was the greater thereby, but all of us give up what we were to become what we are. The Queen's Turn, a 6th century translation of the Barrowchild's account of Lagia's turn, when Lagia, the queen unsated, was offered the opportunity to enter the service of the Hours of the Triple Knot as long as she repudiated her brother-lover Antaios. Lagia accepts, setting aside the arts of the low red sun associated with Antaios. She bargains, however, for freedom for her daughters. The Hours of the Triple Knot accept casually, knowing that Lagia has devoured her daughters, but wily Lagia has decided, in the secret hollow of her heart, that she will adopt any who ask if they can prove their fierceness. The traditions described here, the ones generally described as hill and hollow, are associated with Lagia before her turn, but now that she is a name of the Grail, they might also be safely used before an altar of the Triple Knot. This, of course, got us another secret of the house. The Crossing to Noon, the mystic Garcia Sauri gives a picturesque account of the adventures of Franklin Bancroft, Prince of Wines, and Ava de Wolf, the Pale Lady, on their way to the hidden island of Noon. For a long time, the Blackbone pondered her next move, until the moon dared to peep from behind a cloud, and the prince completed the composition of his third sestina, but the lady met the blind gaze of its open pores, waiting for the tide. Garcia Sauri acknowledges in an epilogue that it is widely known that Ava in fact tragically drowned herself and her twin infant granddaughters without ever making such a journey. But he adds contemptuously, it is also widely known that the city unbuilt will so remain, that only one history is ever written, and that Janus is a Mansus prank. The Kukurbit Prisoner Records 1928 accounts by Governor Collar's private secretary of interventions and experiments in the last years of the Kukurbit prison, focusing particularly on the hill children, wild wood things that have found shape in the physical world. Something called a Singlefoot, a Horn Mountain dweller, is brought back from some kind of embassy to the Grove of Green Immortals. Collars expresses his irritation that Gervenius van Loren refuses to assist in its containment. The Singlefoot somehow conjures an earthquake that cracks the tower and enables its escape. Collars determines that it should not have been permitted to dream while kept beneath the earth. It had access to sufficient scale aspect to use Arts of Hill and Hollow to develop an old moment into an earthquake name. He mandates above-ground confinement for all Hill Children prisoners in the future. It may be interesting to wonder, too, in terms of underground confinement. The only one we really seem to have here is the oubliette, so I wonder if there is some other cell that it might have been kept in. To a Pale Lady, a collection of Franklin Bancroft's letters to Ava de Wolf. There's a substantial body of erotic pleading and half-finished poetry, but also learned discursions on matters mythical and marine, as well as notes towards a comic opera on which Franklin and Ava were apparently collaborating. Do not return, O my light, to the sea. None of us can be what we were. That is history's curse. None of us know what we might be. That is history's gift. Your mothers and the mothers of your mothers are caught in eternity's jaws like a rope ham in a trap. It is the pearl that shines, but the tide that returns. And the voyages of Furnishon of Oriel, the impossible travels of a sea captain in the late Phoenician era, suppressed throughout recorded history. Those who read it were said to disappear. Furnishon clearly visited the Mansus, sailing the length of the Painted River. He also claims to have traversed a sea of finest sand, to have dared the blazing waves of the sun's surface, and to have descended to an underworld ocean lit by lamps of black nephrite. Furnishon's final voyage is to retirement on a peaceful island across an evening sea, where he identifies a spring whose waters will keep him safe. I will be forgotten, he declares, and this work my only trace. All right, so one last round of reading for us. Let's recover an element of the soul. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. So in terms of books, we have two that we have not yet touched. In terms of ordinary books, The Ascendant and the Book of Maya. These are two Hyksos texts. And in addition to that, we have a book that houses a Newman, A Child's Treasury of Golden Afternoons. So effectively, once we get a Hyksos Traveler, we can add 3 traditional books to the library. And in addition to that, we will also have the Open Head, which is a film. But what I will do is we will take care. I'll start with Colors in the Liver. So in this case, we have a more limited set, but we can still work with this. So Grail Satisfaction, I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. And then while we do that, the difference in terms of books versus films is that you can only really feed these in one at a time. So in this case, it doesn't make as much sense to just sort of focus only on films or only on books. There's also not that many films. In this case here, it sort of helps to just sort of keep them running in parallel, but obviously just managing the big block of books is sort of enough to kind of keep my elements of the soul occupied. So now what we'll wind up doing with the phonograph and the film is we'll just make sure that we have the elements of the soul that have the relevant aspects, and keeping in mind that there is actually another phonograph in Hush House if you play the game a bit later. I think it's in this room. Obviously your experience will be a little bit different from mine just because I'm playing it's a version of the game. So this is a bit of a weird one. Originally, I needed to run this to deal with the new aspects that it had. And I actually have to deal with the new aspects without the advantage of the replacement phonograph. So it does make things a little more complicated when trying to read the quote-unquote read the phonograph records, but it wasn't a deal breaker. It was just a little challenging. But this does also create a small complication just in terms of making sure that I get everything like my elements of the soul that I just do effective things with them. So I think in addition to reading, let's also continue to investigate the house. Now, I believe I've looked at all of the different busts. It is a little tricky for me to remember exactly where I left things off. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do sort of I was thinking maybe I would do a painting run, but maybe we don't worry. You know what? We can work with the paintings. There are some bits of furniture that I sort of want to look at too, but let's start by looking at the art. Actually, I'm going to start by looking at the canvas just because I'm curious. And of course, if I want, I can employ a lot more towards Crowcross Sands if I'm so inclined, but I do wind up throwing away a lot of the stuff at Crowcross, so whether I want to do that or not is an open question. Alright, sea-strewn, salt-snared stuff. If I cast an object into the sea, it will be lost, perhaps irretrievably. Canvas, woven from pale flax for the revelation of images. Black flax, of course, is the substance skin of the hour called velvet. I think at this point I'm going to put a second effort in the day. I don't know if I'll stick with this permanently, but because I'm a little more constrained in terms of what I can do, I'm going to give this a shot. All right, so let's take the painting of the Mansis. I think we've read this a couple times before, but it seems a natural place to start. We'll go up into the Flood Gallery and take a look at some of the paintings there. Obviously, with that, there will be duplicates as well, but it gives me something to start with. When something is given to the sea, it rarely returns, although, of course, I did. Whatever it was, now it isn't. Okay, the Larkabing Codex. Christopher Larkabus claimed to have purchased 2 handwritten copies of the Codex from a family of witches on the shores of the Sea of Marmara. A third was given to the sea. The sister and witch came from the west, where they were, born in 2 wombs, one a princess, one a monster. Nevertheless, they loved each other from birth, and met in secret to seek union. When the great drought came, the kings of that land tried to sacrifice the princess and the witch, so they sailed across the sea. When despair took them, they flung themselves into the drowning waters, and so found the Painted River, where they entered the Mansis through the offices of the Red Grail. Nevertheless, the Codex ends with a condemnation of the Grail. Lalacamia set out to end Abykassis' misery, although her ultimate intention remained uncertain, even to her. Better now. Colors in the Liver, Ilse Bischof's most controversial film, blamed for outbreaks of cannibalistic killings in Tiflis and Leipzig. A gang of heretic priests agrees to strike the fear of the change into the infuriatingly atheist citizenry. At night, they dressed as 4-winged angels and crawl down chimneys and through windows to savage members of their congregation. The priests are caught by unidentified figures wearing heavily mandibled masks like grotesque caricatures of ants. They are force-fed larvae. A final caption indicates that at dawn, the larvae will hatch. All right, we will continue on. We'll use the Arab this time for the Admonitory Automata project. An investigation of a foundered country, subtitled Recordings from the Atlantic Coast. The phonograph initially seems to consist entirely of wave sounds and cries of gulls, but attention to the cries suggests they are not gulls at all, perhaps not even birds. The bird cries resolve to possibly human voices, half lost in the sound of waves. They lament the absence of a city unborn. They hymn the ice behind the wave, the amber cobbles, or perhaps amber corals. The tenor of their song is melancholy, but also increasingly menacing, as they promise the city irresistible. As the voices fade, distant bells are clearly to be heard among the surf sounds. Right, so this is going to be a little tricky for me to keep track of in between episodes, especially because this is the last for the week, if I have got my schedule right. But we have now completed all of the library that we can currently read. So sort of from left to right, we've handled all of the texts that we've put in place. We've said that there are 3 more texts, plus whatever we wind up getting from Oriflammes this season that we're dependent on Hyksos for. And we're starting to investigate sort of parts of the house again. I don't know if I want to do the full sort of top to bottom investigation of all the different rooms. I suppose if there's nothing else for me to do, that's an option. But I feel like that might lose a little too much of the plot. So what I'm going to do here, just to try and prioritize things, I will definitely look at all of the paintings first, and then we'll sort of follow up with some of the rooms and some of the bits of furniture. So, something like the inscribed clock, well, that's a gift from David Green to a favored retainer. That I might want to take a look at. Something like, say, the spanners, maybe that's not as important, or, investigating the sand or something along those lines. So, but yeah, the aim is going to be to continue focusing on texts, quote unquote, in terms of things that give me memories and just generally are the kinds of things that we would house in the library. But we're slowly transitioning towards investigating parts, individual objects in the house, such as paintings. And then after that, we'll also be moving into either investigating the house itself or possibly some of the crafting. One other thing I'll just note on here, because I think there's a reasonable claim to be made that reading the different texts and getting their lore is something potentially interesting. But there's also a reasonable concern that people might have with the idea of whether or not I can sustain a season of interesting videos. I think some would argue I'm already incapable of sustaining a week of interesting videos, but I don't think those people hang around for the full video. But the one observation I'll just make here is that I do actually have some options in terms of one season would definitely be something where I investigate the house, but there is in fact an option to bring in Numa early. Now, I have resisted using that option because I just think there are more interesting things that I can do, and it would be better if I can just let the game take its course. But we've been particularly unlucky in the sense that we did have a character that could give me Hyksos, and I think I didn't have the money at the time. But it just happens to be that the draws have not necessarily worked in my favor, and the one Newman that I can currently get that is attached to my my legacy, attached to the artist, is basically it's hidden behind that book. So the first effort was to maybe just sort of get the lore, get the ideas from the different books to see if that would prompt some different actions that I could take, which has more or less turned out. We are getting to the point where I'm running out of options to do that, and so we have the danger of potentially just sort of sitting around waiting for seasons to pass. And while it's not that hard to fast forward through the game, there are absolutely things that I can do in the meantime. And if I'm really feeling like we need to increase the cadence of visitors to the house, I can talk about the thing that you can do to bring Numa to the house. I'm a little reluctant to use that because that will involve me giving up some other things. But on that note, thank you very much for watching. I will see you Monday as we finish off the remaining film, as we dig into the phonograph records, and we get acquainted with the house. I'm particularly interested in maybe spending some more time with the Dawn period, just because it's one that overall I think I have the weakest grasp on. But until then, take care.